Hey guys, Nicole here from Obscure Reptiles and Caging, and today we're going to be going over ball python hatchling care. So let's get started. Hey guys, Nicole here from Obscure Reptiles and Caging, and today we're going to be talking about ball python hatchlings, and we're going to go over their care, and we're going to do it in two different parts. First part's going to be more or less for breeders who want to know step by step kind of a little bit of the egg process, when they start to hatch, what to do, and their setups. And the second part is for when anyone gets a baby ball python for the first time. It's going to have a couple of tips, it's going to show you setups, and it's going to give you things like the temperatures they should have, and all basic info you should know. So first off, this right here is a female I produced last year. She's not a hatchling per se, but she's the closest that we have right now. We'll have some hatchlings hatching out any day now, so I'm going to be putting a few clips of them in here, but right now I brought her out because this is a GHI lesser pinstripe I produced, and I brought her out since I normally name my females, but I wasn't sure if I was going to keep her, and now I'm definitely going to use her as a holdback. So I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to help me pick out a name for her. If you guys could help me pick out a name and put it in the comments below. So this first part is going to be for people who are out breeding and they're getting eggs and they don't really know what to do because they haven't done it before. Right here I'm going to put a timestamp for you guys. Anyone who just wants to see the actual care and enclosure and all that kind of stuff for just one baby, you just have a pet, you can jump ahead, go to that. If not, this is going to be starting off with from the egg. So let's say the eggs are starting to pip. Normally what you're going to want to do is cut the egg, that way they can come out. So what I like to do is I like to get a little cup of water, and I like to actually rinse off the babies, because when they come out they're going to be covered in whatever substrate, whether it's vermiculite, hatchrite, whatever you're using, they're going to be covered in it. So I like to rinse them off. I personally like to put each baby individual, that way I know exactly how many males versus females, what I have. And some breeders will put them in a larger container until they have their first shed, so they don't have to spray down so many enclosures. I don't mind it. I'd rather be able to check on each individual snake as they progress. Now the babies are going to have to be sprayed 1 to 2 times a day until they have their first shed. They have to stay wet and damp. You're not going to soak the enclosure, it has to stay damp. So all you have to do is open it, spray it down with your spray bottle, and that's it. Once they have their first shed, that's when everything's going to start rolling. I have to get an index card, write down the day they hatch, the day they have their first shed, first meals, all that type of stuff. Some people actually like to know the exact day that they hatch, so I do my best to write that down because some people like to know, and that way I can also monitor everything and how they're progressing, the weight that they are, all that type of stuff as soon as they hatch. The next most important thing after they shed is to get them to have their first meal. That can be pretty tricky. I personally like to use live rats versus frozen or live mice. The reason I prefer rats is because they're a little bit healthier, and sometimes you can get mousers. You can have snakes, if you start them off with mice, that won't switch to anything, but if they eat rats, they'll pretty much eat anything as when they're older. So it's easier to do a pinky rat versus, a fuzzy mouse. So I prefer rats, and a couple of tips is make sure you do it at night. That's when they're most active, and some are going to be very cautious babies. A lot of them are not going to know what it is. It takes a while to get them to feed properly. Sometimes it will take a while to get that baby eating. Don't give up. You're not going to want to jump to anything like assist or force feeding. That's something that's last effort. That's another reason why you're going to want to weigh them as soon as you have them, because that way you can monitor how long it takes for them to actually lose any weight. Because some babies will eat, they're going to shed in 2 weeks, they're going to take their first meal, and they're never going to skip a meal. And those are the type of babies that are ready to sell, ready to go. Most babies are going to be a little bit slower. They're going to tend to want to hide more. They might be snippy towards you or strikey, but they're not actually going at the food. That's okay. Just keep trying. Do it at night. Make sure that it's nice and quiet wherever these babies are. Make sure that the temperature, the setup, everything is perfect. When it comes to setup, make sure you go very simple, very basic. Here's what I personally use. 6-quart Sterlite bin. You have a hide on one side, paper towel on the bottom, and I like these water dishes. You get them on Amazon or at pet stores. They have a lip underneath, so it works as a second hide on the cold side. Plus these larger water dishes, the babies can actually get in themselves, and it works much better. Once you have them eating, I recommend you want them to feed at least 5 times, and the last 3 of those have to be in a row. So for example, if you have a baby and it never misses a meal, perfect, that baby's ready to go. But if you have a baby that's a little bit more picky and it keeps missing a meal, missing, taking, unless it's really growing in weight and size, that baby's not ready to go. So if you have a baby hatch out at 40 grams, maybe it's ready to go at 80 grams because it's doubled in size, it's eating every week. That's great. Or you have a baby that's 80 grams that hatched and he or she's barely feeding and it's missing a lot of meals and it's only 85 grams. That's not as healthy as that 80 gram that's feeding really consistently. So just make sure you have good animals. You're selling, quality animals that are going to thrive, because it's going to be trickier for the new person, or if you're selling it as a pet to someone who's never had a snake, they're not going to be as knowledgeable, and it's a lot easier when the snake's very well started rather than having problems down the line because the person can't get the animal to eat and they're frustrated. Now when it comes to somebody who wants a pet, the same exact setup is going to work perfectly. The same 6-quart Sterlite bin. Do not go too big too quick. People all the time want to put them in like a 100-gallon glass tank or something way too large, when this is the easiest, best thing. Even when people put down, for example, like carpets and stuff like that as the bottom, hold on to the bacteria every time it goes to the bathroom and waste. Unless you're completely taking it out, completely sanitizing it every time, it's still going to hold all that bacteria and germs. So when you can do paper towel, you can actually keep an eye on your animal. You can see exactly what's going on with them, how much they're using the bathroom, watching their shed. You can even spray down the enclosure if they're going in the shed, and you can see that it's not, it's not humid enough in there. And with these, you can get something like a heating pad or a heat tape and hook it up to a reptile thermostat. The reptile thermostat is the best because that way you can actually control the exact temperature that's in your enclosure. If it's too hot or too cold, the animal can't self-regulate, so it's not going to even try to feed because it can't even control its own body temperature properly. So it's not going to try to eat, and that's something you definitely don't want. So make sure whatever setup you're using, especially for a baby, don't go any bigger than this. Actually, the female from the beginning, the one that I wanted you guys to give me some names for, she's only in the next size up, which is this size. It's a 12-quart Sterlite bin. So it's double the size of the 6-quart. That's the size of the female you saw earlier who's 9 months old. That's the size she's comfortably in. She will be upgraded soon, but you don't want to go too fast because in the wild, baby ball pythons like to hide. They don't come out very often. They only come out to eat food. So when you upgrade them too fast, not enough hides, then they start to get overwhelmed and stressed out and they're not going to eat. And that's the biggest thing, is when people message me saying that they got a new baby or something like that and they can't get it to eat, what would I recommend? I always ask what their enclosure looks like. Most of the time when there's issues, it's people who have them in glasses, or it's people who have them in a humongous enclosure when they're just tiny little hatchlings. This first clutch we had is the pied clutch. Everyone ended up being piebalds. I'm going to check genders. This whole clutch is actually sold, but we will be having more pieds coming up, so if anyone's interested, you can find us on Facebook at Twisted Reptiles. And if you ever want cages and you're local, not only do we make racks, which would include bins and stuff, we also make PVC enclosures. So either route you want to go through, we don't ship right now, but we're located by Buffalo, New York, so we can help you out if you are local. But the most important thing I can say, especially for people who are new to baby ball pythons, I know you're going to want to hold the animal. I know you're very excited to be able to have it out and, experience being with the baby. But the biggest thing is getting that animal to eat. That if it's not feeding, it's stressed. And by you taking it out and handling it, that's going to make it even more stressed than it already is. So take your time, make sure the animal's feeding consistently. After it's had a few meals, give it a couple days. Make sure it's a few days past that last meal, then you can start handling. But you want them eating consistently before then. A few things, you can easily Google these things, but for example, for your new baby ball python hatchling, you're going to want the hot spot, the hot side, you're going to want right around 90 to 92 degrees. You're going to want the cold side, like 75 to 80 is perfect for the cold side, and you can get that by the temperature gun we talked about in our first video ever. In the first video I ever talked about is items that ball python owners should have. Temperature gun would tell you exactly what the hot side is and what the cold side is. As they age and get bigger, instead of the paper towel, you can do something like cocoa husks or Reptichip, which is what I like to use. It is a coconut fiber. It helps a lot with holding humidity, making it a lot easier to clean, and it looks a lot better than paper towels or newspaper at the bottom of enclosures. You're going to want to be feeding your baby every 5 to 7 days when they're young. You want them to have a meal that's about the size of their body. Generally when they're hatchling, it's a pinky to fuzzy rat, and that's going to go up as they age. And as their body size gets larger, the meal sizes have to get larger. You want to feed closer to every 7 days when they're probably Once they hit the like 3 to 6 month range, and depending on how well they've been feeding for you and growing, then you're going to want to slow down the meals. Instead of every 5 to 7 days, just keep it at every 7 days. But yeah, if you get anything out of this, make sure you have your animal in the right enclosure. Try not to do glass if at all possible. Make sure they have hides. Make sure they have access to water. There's a good temperature gradient between the 90 to 92 degree hot spot and 75 to 80 degree cool side. And a lot of babies are going to be snippy. Unfortunately, that's just how they are in the wild. Anything can eat them. They have no defense but their mouth. So when a baby is snippy, don't take it personally. Don't think that the animal's awful. Some babies are worse than others, but especially once you have that animal eating and you start taking it out, number one, take it out with a hook. I'll put a link in the description below for the video we did with items you should have, but a hook should be one of them. As they age, they will be better. When they're babies is when they're the worst. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And we're going to be doing videos every Wednesday. So we'll see you next Wednesday.